You're listening to Law and Gospel on this Friday, December the 1st, in the year of our Lord 2023. We keep talking about how quickly Christmas comes, and we're already in December. Wow, the months just seem to be flying by. But what we're going to be talking about today is a very interesting article that is put out by the Washington Post. It was an analysis of homeschooling. And it says that homeschooling, by a wide margin, is America's fastest growing form of education, as families from Upper Manhattan to Eastern Kentucky embrace a largely unregulated practice once confined to the ideological fringe. The analysis is based on data that the Washington Post collected for thousands of school districts across the country and reveals a dramatic rise in homeschooling. It began, of course, with the onset of the pandemic, but has largely sustained itself through the 2020-22-23 academic year, defining predictions that most families would return to schools that have dispensed with mask mandates and other COVID-19 restrictions. Now, I know that my own congregation, to which I am a member here in Missouri, that it is expanding its school enrollment. It already has a large school, but it doesn't have enough room. And so they're beginning to build what's going to cost a $15 million extension to their parochial school. They've already collected or have been promised around $12 million from the congregation. And there are so many people wanting to come to this parochial school. And that's because if you take a look at the public schools, what they're teaching is really not very good in certain areas, especially on racism, black ministry, homosexuality, abortion, and even possible suicide that you can get from a doctor. Why would you want your child being taught in such a school? Now, in 11 states, including Texas, Michigan, Connecticut, and Illinois, officials do not require notification when families decide to educate their children at home or monitor how those students are faring. 7 additional states have unreliable tallies of homeschooled kids. The Post was able to collect reliable data from 32 states and the District of Columbia, representing more than 60% of the country's school-age population. In 18 of those states, private and public school enrollment figures were available for comparison. In other words, the resulting analysis, which includes homeschooling registration figures for nearly 7,000 individual school districts, is the most detailed look to data at an unprecedented growth of rate in America homeschooling. I am helping out a congregation that called 10 pastors to become full-time and they declined. And it appeared that some of them declined because in our city, at this school that I'm helping with in Illinois, there is no parochial school. And you know that the public school under the present governor of Illinois is teaching things that are absolutely contrary to the Bible. So examination of the data reveals in states with comparable enrollment figures, the number of homeschool students increased 51% over the past school years. Public school enrollment dropped 4% in those states over the same period, and a decline partly attributable to homeschooling. Homeschooling urging popularity crosses every measurable line of politics, geography, and demographics. The number of homeschooled kids has increased 373% over the past 6 years in the small city of Anderson, South Carolina. It's also increased 358% in a school district in the Bronx. In 390 districts, according to the Post's analysis, there was at least one homeschooled child for every 10 in public schools during the 21-22 academic year. That's roughly quadruple the number of districts that had rates that high in 2017 and 2018. This signifies a sea change in how many communities educate their children and an urgent challenge for a public education system that faces dwindling enrollment even before the pandemic. Despite claims that the homeschooling boom is a result of failing public schools, the Post found no correlation between school district quality as measured by standardized test scores and homeschooling growth. In fact, high-scoring districts had some of the biggest spikes in homeschooling early in the pandemic. Because they do not cover every state, the figures cannot provide a total count of the country's homeschooled children. The National Center for Education Statistics reported that in 2019, there were 1.5 million kids homeschooled in the United States. Based on that figure and the growth since then in states that track homeschooling, the Post estimates that there are almost 2.7 million homeschooled children in the United States. In comparison, there are fewer than 1.7 million in Roman Catholic schools. About 3.7 million students attend charter schools, according to the most recent federal data. It is a remarkable expansion for a form of instruction that 40 years ago was considered illegal in much of the country. In other words, it was illegal for parents to homeschool their children. According to Nat Malkus, a senior fellow and deputy director of education policy at the American Enterprise Institute, a conservative leading think tank, this is a fundamental change of life, and it's astonishing that it's so persistent. In fact, the rise of homeschooling is all the more remarkable, given the immense logistical challenges many parents must overcome to directly supervise their kids' education. You take a look at some of the states. In California, there has been a 78% increase in homeschool student enrollment since the 2017-2018 school year. In New York, it's been a 103% increase. In Washington, D.C., it's been a 108% increase. In Florida, it's been a 72% increase. Now, there's not statistics available, but it seems that in those states where there are a number of parochial schools, the increase is much smaller. In Missouri, there is no statistics because, for example, here in St. Louis, we have over 100 parochial schools, and there is often tuition grants given to put your children in a parochial school. This is a real opportunity for Lutheran parochial schools as mine church is growing and expanding with a parochial school. In most states, the Post found out that though homeschooling has fallen slightly from its peak, it still remains at highs unmatched before the 2020-2021 school year. In only 2 states, Georgia and Maryland, has it returned to pre-pandemic levels, and in 4, Florida, South Carolina, Louisiana, and South Dakota, homeschooling has continued to expand. Now, the rate has also led critics of weak regulation to sound alarms. Homeschooled kids don't have to submit to any form of testing for academic progress in most states. And even states that require assessments often offer loopholes, according to the Coalition for Responsible Home Education, which urges greater oversight. Many of America's new homeschooled children have entered a world where no government official will ever check on what or how well they are being taught. Wow, this is a lot of kids, says Elizabeth Bartholet, a retired professor at Harvard Law School and child welfare advocate. We should worry about whether they're learning anything. But in my familiarity with parents who are teaching their kids at home, they're learning a lot. There are a lot of courses geared for homeschoolers, and you can get involved with them. The Gulf Coast count of 1.5 million, including Tampa and its orbit of suburbs, is famous as a barometer of the nation's political mood. Its vote results have predicted the winner in 22 of the last 24 presidential elections. Now it is a harbinger of a different trend, the widespread adoption and acceptance of home schooling. At the beginning of the 2020-22 academic year, within Hillsborough County School District, there were 10,680 children being homeschooled. The county's homeschoolers outnumber the entire public enrollment of thousands of other school districts across the country, and their ranks have grown 74% since 2017. Over the same period, public school enrollment just grew by 3.4%. Now, just as remarkable, there is an infrastructure that has grown up to support home schoolers. Their instruction still happens at home much of the time. When Corey McCowan began teaching her kids 14 years ago in Carrollwood, a Tampa suburb, once or twice a week, parent-run group co-ops offered a chance to mingle with what was still a small community of home educators. But today, Hillsborough homeschoolers inhabit a scholastic and extracurricular ecosystem that in many ways is indistinguishable from that of a public or private school. Homeschooled kids play competitive sports. They put on full productions of Mary Poppins and Les Miserables. They have high school education ceremonies, as well as a prom and homecoming dance. The Christian homeschooling group that had about 40 kids in 2011, when McCowan joined it, has now grown to nearly 600 students. And they do not lack for anything. We have come such a long way. You can even talk to members of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod and phone headquarters for material that is available for homeschoolers if you are in a congregation that has no parochial school in your area, as I had in Illinois. Of the 10 districts with the most homeschooled kids, 9 are in Florida. That's partly because of the state's large school districts, but also because its elected officials have grown friendlier to home education as they saddle public schools with politically charged restrictions on what can be taught about race and gender, which many times is contrary to biblical teaching. Homeschooled kids in Florida aren't required to sit through the standardized test as their public school peers, but they are allowed to join the same high school sports teams and are eligible for the same scholarships at public universities. I can tell you right now, says Lynn Gray, many of these parents don't have any understanding of education. The price will be very big to us and to society, but that won't show up for a few years. Some of homeschooling immediate costs to society will be more directly measurable in certain states. For example, Governor Ron DeSantis, Republican in Florida, followed the lead of policymakers in other conservative states and expanded the state's educational voucher programs. Children who learn at home are now eligible if their parents submit instructional plans and they take an annual standardized test. As a result, families in Hillsborough County may be getting their most powerful incentive yet to homeschool, getting up to $8,000 per child in annual taxpayer funding. Homeschooled kids number more than 154,000 in Florida, the largest count among states with available data. But in no states have their ranks grown faster than in New York. Its homeschool population has more than doubled since 2017, rising to nearly 52,000 students. It was the largest statewide increase in the post database, and some of the fastest growing growth came into place, not necessarily synonymous with home education in New York City. In 24 of the city's 33 school districts, homeschooled children increased by at least 200% over 6 years. Now, of course, we in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod encourage you to attend a parochial school if it is available, because costs can be sometimes helped out with tuition. And the children are getting not only good homeschooling, but also biblical teaching and getting a Christian viewpoint. Yesterday, we talked about with Wes Reimnitz how many parents who are Christian really don't know the Christian worldview as well as they should. And so their children are not learning it. But through a parochial school and through particularly these homeschoolers that use material from the religious organization of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, they learn a lot, both academically and, more important, biblically. So even in excellent schools, people are leaving them because their teaching at home is better. For example, one lady, Stephanie Peterson, lived in a city which outperformed 80% of other school districts nationwide on standardized test scores. She describes herself as a very pro-public education, but she found her children didn't thrive in the public schools. Her eldest daughter eventually transferred to a charter school. Officials at the local elementary school did not properly accommodate her 9-year-old daughter's severe peanut allergy, and she worried that school services for the girl's autism were insufficient. By 2021, Peterson has homeschooled both her 9-year-old and her 7-year-old son. She still says, "I think my school district is excellent, but if your kid has special needs, then be careful of the school district." And we would agree with that, especially in states like Illinois, where the teachers are commanded to teach contrary to God's holy word. So it appears that other factors are going to fuel more growth in the years ahead. Those parents who now homeschool had concerns in the survey about school shootings, bullying, and the general quality of the school environment, some of which school officials have limited power to solve, were among the top reasons for homeschooling. Many also found that they feared the intrusion of politics into public education, a worry unlikely to recede amid arguments over how sexual identity, Black history, and other subjects are handled in the classroom. Thanks in part to such policies, homeschooling will increasingly compete for tax dollars with the public education system. And what an opportunity for Lutheran Missouri Synod congregations to open up a home school, to begin with preschooling and see how many parents will join and increase it to parochial school. Many are turning away from public school. Public school enrollment has declined 16% over the last 6 years in some school districts. And the number of homeschoolers has grown 80%. Something to think about as we Christians attempt to make sure our children are given a Christian worldview. I'm Tom Baker. Join us Monday for more information on law and gospel. Till then, God bless you.
Listen to Law and Gospel each weekday morning at 9:30 on KFUO. For a tax-deductible gift to Law and Gospel, please make your check out to Law and Gospel and mail to Law and Gospel, P.O. Box 28910, St. Louis, Missouri 63132, or call toll-free 1-877-267-1962.
Views and opinions expressed on Worldwide KFUO may not represent the official position of the management or ownership of KFUO, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. If you'd like to comment on programs or topics heard on Worldwide KFUO, write us at KFUO, 1333 South Kirkwood Road, St. Louis, Missouri 63122. You can also leave a question or comment on our comment line at 314-996-1542. We are the messenger of good news, Worldwide KFUO.